that changed my life. And I don't say that lightly. It really has been transformational for me. How many of you in this room have read The 7 Habits? How many of you have read it within the last 10 years? Awesome. So I'm going to give you, first of all, just a summary of what this book is about. Stephen Covey is an educator. You know, he started studying success literature, and what he found was that there was a very troubling trend in success literature, and he said that if you go back and look at the original success literature around the turn of the century, it's based on values, it's based on honesty, character, hard work, you know, things that have value. And sometime towards the middle of the 19th century or the 20th century, 1950s, that changed to the personality ethic. And it became more about quick fixes and attitude. If I adjust my attitude, if I work harder, I'm going to have success. But what went by the wayside were these foundational principles, these timeless principles. So what he did was he really studied over 200 volumes of success literature and wrote the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And he broke the habits down into the 7 habits. Habit number 1, be proactive. Habit number 2, begin with the end in mind. Habit number 3, put first things first. Habit number 4, think win-win. Habit number 5, seek first to understand, then to be understood. Habit number 6, synergize. And habit number 7, sharpen the saw. I'm going to focus just today on the first 3 habits, what Covey calls the private victory. Because if we are not able to basically win the victory over ourselves, we will never win the public victory. And what that means is really doing some self-examination, figuring out, you know, where does improvement lie in my life and how can I make that happen. And he talks about the difference between, in habit 1, being proactive versus being reactive. And really, it's a paradigm. It's how do we look at the world? And we think we see the world as it is, but in reality, we see the world as we are. And a lot of times that leads to a very skewed vision of what's really going on. And he tells the story of being on a subway in New York, and he's on a Sunday morning quiet subway ride, and people are sitting there reading their papers. And this guy gets on with his 2 kids, and the kids start just running around the subway car, just like pulling people's newspapers and making a ton of noise. And finally, Covey says, you know, I was so annoyed, I finally went up to this gentleman. I said, sir, your kids, they're really disturbing a lot of people here. And he said, I know, we just left the hospital and their mother just died, and I don't think they know how to handle it, and I don't think I know how to handle it. And Covey shares, you know, in that moment, my paradigm shifted. I went from a place of aggravation and annoyance to a place of empathy and what can I do to help. So I think, you know, it's a powerful exercise to think about how we view the world. How do we see the world around us? And so many people, I think, especially in the world we live in today, come from a place of being reactive to their circumstances. And Covey has a great a visual. Imagine, if you will, 2 concentric circles. And imagine there's a large circle and a small circle. And the large circle is what he calls the circle of concern. And the circle of concern is things we can't change, we can't control. They are the weather, the economy, politics, the angry client, all these different things that we have no control over. And the reality is, so many of us spend a lot of time in the circle of concern, worrying about stuff we can't do anything about. And what happens when you spend time in the circle of concern, it gets bigger. Proactive people spend time in the circle of influence, making proactive choices about things that they do have control over. You know, I can be more kind. I can go to the gym. I can take an hour to read every day. Those things are going to increase your circle of influence, and as your circle of influence grows, the circle of concern gets smaller. So I think it's just important to spend time in the circle of influence, spend time working on yourself, doing proactive activities. The second habit is begin with the end in mind. And I think it's really important, when I first talked to Will about starting this chapter, we had a vision. We began with the end in mind. We're going to create this incredible group, and by having that vision, we're sitting here today together experiencing that vision in reality. So, Covey, likes to share this exercise of imagine that you're at your own funeral, that, your eulogy is being given by someone that was important to you. What are those people going to say? What legacy do you want to leave? How do you want to affect people and interact with people? And so I think it's so powerful. Steve Jobs said, if you have a big enough vision, you don't need to be pushed. Your vision will pull you to it. And I think, it goes back to being proactive, taking the time to really think about what's important to you and what really matters and what legacy do you want to leave. The third habit that Covey talks about is put first things first. So once you've decided, I'm going to be proactive, I'm going to begin with the end in mind, then how do we really manage our lives in such a way that that happens? And the way we do it is we put first things first. We focus on those things which matter most, not those things which matter least. And Covey shares that, if there is one thing that I could recommend that is the highest leverage use of your time, is to take 30 to 40 minutes every week to plan your week before the week begins. And I would encourage all of you, this is an exercise I've been doing for close to 15 years. Sunday night, I find a quiet place, I take out my day timer, and I think about the roles that I play in my life. And for me, as you know, Buffini is one of my mentors, but he breaks things down into basically 5 circles. There's spiritual, family, business, financial, and personal being emotional and physical. So I asked myself what Covey calls the big rock question. What one thing can I do in this area of my life that will have the greatest positive impact in this area of my life? And then I schedule time in my calendar for that thing. So in my family, for my spiritual, okay, I'm going to do my daily devotional, and I'm going to get to choir practice, and I'm going to be in church on Sunday. For family, I'm going to call my 93-year-old Uncle Peter and tell him about my trip to Ireland. And so as you go through these different roles that you play, schedule the big rock activities, schedule those things that really matter most, and then ask yourself that question, what one thing can I do this week that will have the greatest positive impact in that area of my life? And then proactively take action on that. The 7 habits are really what Covey calls the maturity continuum. It's a continual growth continuum. And it starts with the private victory, the victory over self. And we are all relational creatures. And what matters most as human beings is relations and relationships. And there's a deeper level, and he talks about, going from basically independence to interdependence. So the next 3 habits are really about that interdependent reality, about seeking first to understand, then to be understood, which is really about learning how to listen. And we are all taught how to read, how to write, and how to speak. None of us are taught how to listen. And that is probably the most important skill for us as human beings, not only personally, but professionally. And so take time to learn how to listen. I like to say, listen to learn and learn to listen. And then synergize. This group is a perfect example of synergy. The sum is greater, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And we as a group are able to create things that each one of us as individuals could never create. And then habit 7 is sort of the circle around all the other habits, and habit 7 is sharpen the saw. And what that is, it's personal renewal. It's taking time to take care of ourselves, because if we don't take care of ourselves, we're not going to be any good for anyone else. So sharpening the saw, Abraham Lincoln, there's a famous quote, if I had 2 hours to chop down a tree, I'd spend an hour sharpening my saw. Do we take the time to make those proactive choices, to take care of our bodies, to take care of our nutrition, to get plenty of sleep, to recreate? I love what Covey says, recreation is recreation. So take time to recreate. Take time to spend time with family and friends, and be proactive. Live proactively. Don't live in the circle of concern. Live in the circle of influence and watch your influence grow. Thank you.